Welcome to Legacy Unscripted, sponsored by Progeny Coaching. This is the podcast where sports and business collide. I'm your host, Russ Katzman, and here we'll skip the fluff and get straight to the hustle. From athletes turned entrepreneurs to impact-driven business leaders, we dive into the wins, the lessons, and some of those failures that make legacies worth living. Today we have Victoria Lozano, attorney, founder, and educator, and we're going to talk to her today about Blue 7 content. Victoria, good to see you. Tell us about Blue 7.
Thanks. Good to see you too. And thank you for hosting me here on your podcast. Blue 7 Content, we are an SEO company. We are an SEO content company. We write content. That's what we've niched down to.
Yeah.
We started in 2020. We have grown significantly since. We primarily work with law firms. So the legal marketing is kind of our bread and butter. We write content for law firm websites. We do SEO strategy as well within that writing. And, but we've also kind of branched into other areas. We've branched into contractors. We're trying to get into the sports industry as well. This company originated in South Carolina, Myrtle Beach, the Gulf Mecca. And so that's kind of what we're trying to tap into as well. But we also have like a coffee shop, and we're looking at developing a band. So yeah, there's lots of opportunity there.
So why content? What is it about content that you felt passionate about driving that forward?
Yeah. So that kind of leads into like our origin story as well when we kind of dive in there. So I have always been a writer, and so has my business partner. We've known each other since third grade, and our lives have, come in and out and have paralleled themselves and crossroad themselves. And so we went to the same middle school, high school, college, even. College is really where I had to navigate my path. I started out as marine science, well, both of us did. And then I ended up in English. He ended up in poli-sci. And writing was like our foundation. He went on to teach high school. I taught higher ed. And all the while I was doing my education, all the while I was teaching, it was never enough, right? There was always the need for a side hustle. There was always a need to make a little extra. So freelance writing is what I did. I wrote for newspapers. I wrote for magazines. I wrote for different, online companies, and Alan did as well. Sure. It wasn't until around probably 2016, 2017, when both of our parents became really ill, kind of at the same time. So we had to switch into caretaker roles. And I say all this to say that freelancing and writing was our main outlet. That was something that we could consistently lean on when we had to leave our jobs, or when we had to switch jobs, or when we needed a gap between our jobs. And as an educator, I taught writing. I taught business writing. I taught research writing. So I was very familiar with the writing process. My master's is in rhetoric and writing. So I was really familiar with the tools and guides to use in order to help people learn how to write, especially elevated writing. So when we were writing, we realized that there wasn't a lot of formal approach to it. We would get a client, they would give us a topic, and then we would just write it.
Gotcha.
So we kind of formalized it. But writing has, to kind of get back to the question, like writing has just always been something that we've been very passionate about. We like to educate. I love to educate and help craft writers and develop writers. So that's kind of how we kind of stayed in that little niche. We just realized that there were a lot of agencies, marketing agencies, that were doing pay-per-click, building your website, doing, creating the online space that you need, but they couldn't find the writers, or they were outsourcing to writers that just weren't appropriately doing it. So we were like, let's formalize it. let's create guides, let's do this. And that's what we did.
It's funny because as my son grew up and went through high school and was taking all these classes, typical teenager, why do I have to take this? Why do I have to take that? And at one point I said to him, I said, the one class that I use more than anything, so it's not one of my business courses from college. It's not one of my math courses that I love so much. I said, there is nothing that I use on a daily basis more than the grammar and writing class I had my freshman year of high school. Right. It's in everything we do. It's in how we communicate. It's the changing our tone from one person to another person if we need to. Having that type of talent and that ability is far more useful to any profession than anything else. Yes, we're starting to text and we'll, cut words short and all that kind of stuff. But if you can truly communicate with somebody, even in an AI world, and we'll talk about that later, but even in today's world, if you can truly communicate with somebody and get your voice across, it's far more valuable than anything else you can learn. I like it.
I agree. And just to be like a nerd, when you're switching from like audiences or when you're changing like the tone or whatever, it's called code switching. And so it's just really interesting because in the rhetoric world, when you have a difference in like socioeconomic status or cultural status than the typical norm, right? It seems like they have to change, but it's just because they have a completely different code that they have to talk in, and I value that. So
well, and it goes back to the Nelson Mandela quote. I don't remember if we talked about it the last time, right? About if you speak to a man in a language he understands, you speak to his head. If you speak to a man in his own language, you speak to his heart. And being able to communicate to somebody in something that's valuable to them or something that they grew up with or in a manner that they grew up with, whether that's whatever influence that, socioeconomic status or education level or anything like that, it changes the way they can relate to us as a provider, whatever it is that we're putting out there on the market. So I like that. I like that idea, like the concept of being able to do that. So you mentioned the passion of both being writing and an educator. So at Blue 7, do you go beyond just doing it for the client? Do you teach them? Do you coach them through finding their own voice, for finding the story of their own brand? How far do you go in that education part of it?
Yeah, that's a good question. It kind of depends on the client. So when I deal with individual practitioners, I get to play a little more with that. When it comes to when we do work with marketing agencies, they've already had that conversation with the client and they're then just distilling that information to us. And we are then incorporating that message into the content that we're providing for them. So it just kind of depends on what client comes to us and how far we can kind of do that. We're currently working with a client right now who is in the middle of developing what their story is and developing the type of client that they're wanting. And so we're able to help kind of mold what that's going to look like as well. So we can kind of do both. And I also just want to posit here as well the great opportunities, the correct word, but the great perspective that I get to bring because I am a practicing attorney. Yeah. So I know and I bring to the table the understanding of what attorneys go through on a daily basis and who their main audiences are. I mean, part why I became an attorney was because I was completely fascinated with how you have the legal system which is its own language world and having to then distill it or funnel it to your client so that they understand what's going on and they feel adequately advocated for and they don't feel as if they are left without any type of answer. So lawyers are these really great beings where we're kind of like this like conduit, right? Of like, here's the law, here you go, civilians, like, this is what we are. We're the like, we're just like a little cog in the system that like translates these big concepts too. And I've always loved that. And I think that's also within the foundation of education, right? Getting these big theoretical concepts and then passing them off in different ways. So when I talk with these attorneys and they have these expectations and they have these like, well, I want it to be this and I want it to be this, I have to rein them in and be like, I know that's what you want, but that's not what your client wants. I know that's how you want to say it, but that's not how the algorithm wants to say it. So sometimes I have to intervene and be a little firm with some of these clients and be like, I know you want it this way. Here's why we did it this way. And then we usually come to some type of compromise. But they're willing to talk to me because I just think I bring that credibility to the table. That's a little different than others.
Well, and that's exactly it, right? Your background, your understanding of what their role is as an attorney, what they've learned, what their education level is, what they've had to go through to get that far, even your ability to relate to that and to relate to the common audience that they're trying to talk to, right? Who's the typical person I'm trying to connect to because of their specialty, right? The one thing about the law is that it does become very specialized for most practicing attorneys. They have to narrow, otherwise they'd be way too busy, right? They have to narrow their niche to a certain subset of the regular population. And in doing so, that again, it takes that subset of language to become even more of a subset of a different language. And then they get so familiar with it that they sometimes forget what the other individuals that they're speaking to don't know, right? I forget whether it was my mom or my dad, but one of them always used to say, you never underestimate what you know that the other person doesn't, right? And I think when you get attorneys, doctors are this way, highly educated professions, they tend to, they've been so engulfed in this for so long that sometimes they forget that some of the things that they know that their average audience doesn't. Whether that be their ideal client, whether that be a speaking engagement, whatever, using that language, using terms, using ideas that the other person just doesn't know. And for you to be able to translate for that for them in their writing, in their content that they're getting online, I think that's a valuable resource.
Yeah, I mean, it's writing without assumption is what it is. And that's part of like our training process with our writers too, is if you happen to know something, you have to share where you got that information from. And you have to be really active in your research or external links to include, to not only grab that credibility and authority within the algorithm, but to also showcase to the reader, like, okay, this is what it means. And it can be hard because our clients, they're like, this is too basic. And I'm like, this is not for your judge. This is for a client and it needs to be this basic now. We can create more complicated pieces in like your blog or another area on your website. But for things like your landing page or practice area pages, we do want to make it pretty basic.
Yeah, it's funny. I get when I'm working with clients on their elevator pitch, I'll take them through the whole process of setting goals. What do we want the person to understand? What do we need them to know? Common questions, all that kind of stuff. When we get down to that elevator pitch, I said, that's great. I love that. Now write it so a 12-year-old can understand it. Right. And what you do is you start to remove all the jargon and put in there the common language that everybody's going to understand, and that makes it relatable for the audience to be able to pick up on it. And it makes it universal no matter who you're talking about, no matter what their education or socioeconomic status or anything, they can understand what it is that you do and why you're important to them. So imagine there's a concept similar to that. All right. So we danced around it. We're going to come back to it. AI. People seem to think that with the advent of AI, any content writer, any content creator could go out there and create anything they want to in AI and set it up to happen automatically, and they can kick all that content out accordingly. What's the counter to that?
Okay. There's a couple things I feel like I want to say. One, we create it's a general we, but those of us who have been in the SEO world who have written content for years, like I think Alan's going on like a 10-year, I'm going on almost 10 years in writing this content. So this is totally pre-AI. They're using our words to create that content. So you're welcome. But where to start? There's just a few things. So AI can churn out a piece of writing once, for sure. But when you are looking at scaling your site and doing multiple pages in multiple cities, in multiple states, right? More of our nationwide firms, it's going to create a duplication of sections and words and sentences. And that doesn't bode well for ranking. So it can cannibalize itself. Those pages then go dead, defunct, and that just pulls your ranking down. So there's that portion of it. We saw that happening, I think, maybe about a year ago, 2 years ago when ChatGPT had come out. We were shaking in our boots a little bit because writing is our thing. And unfortunately, writing is always the most devalued. And I've never quite understood that. Like, when you open your website, the graphics are there, but then someone's going to read it. But that's for a whole nother podcast.
Yeah.
So, right. So cannibalization of that. Also, when you are using, that was it. Sorry. I'm like getting jumbled real quick. So 2 years ago, AI came out. People were mass producing text and they were boasting that they could do like 100-page batches. And then Google came around and said, it's junk, and completely penalized these sites. And the reason why I know that is because the clients that left us to do that came back. And they said, hey, just kidding. Can we continue? And we were like, of course, like, we're not going to shame anybody. I mean, we giggled, but
charge them a little bit more, but let you go.
Like, by the way, our price increase. Yeah. So there's that too, right? Also, I know we talk about hallucinations. I know in the media, there's a bunch of like, when you put something in, you can't really ever guarantee what is being given back to you is legitimate and correct. When it comes to writing for lawyers and lawyer websites, we have the ABA, which is our ethical overlords, right? To make sure that we are advertising in an ethical way, that we are communicating with our clients in an ethical way. The scary part not scary part, but when it comes to the code of ethic, when it comes to advertising, the ABA takes into account not only what words are being put out there, but how the client is interpreting and receiving the words. That's what's really can be a make or break for whether a client is going to give you a 5-star, be totally dissatisfied. If you're out there and saying, I'm the best, that's giving an interpretation of a guarantee. Well, if you're the best, then I'm going to get the best. So if you use AI doesn't know those rules, or you may be too casually relying on it and assuming that the AI is going to get it right, even if you insert there, like, follow the ABA rules, right? It doesn't know what rules. And yes, you can narrow it down. But the only reason why I'm able to speak so kind of like confidently as to the drawbacks of using AI is because we've done it. We've used it. We've never shied away from what technology is out there. We've created our own chat GPTs.
Sure.
Alan is like a whole nerd about it. And I do wish that he was here, but unfortunately his mother is actually going through a whole nother health crisis. And if anything, we can circle back to how this agency company functions solely because there's two of us and just the great benefits of having a teammate. But yeah, so I used to have this analogy where I said, you'd walk into a museum, you'd see like a Jackson Pollock painting, which is, the painting where you splatter paint, or it looks like splattered paint and like connections. And someone will walk in and be like, oh, I can do that. And you think, well, one, you didn't. And two, you didn't think to do it. And 3, even though you said it, you're not going to do it. Even though you say you think you can, you're not going to go home, buy the canvas, buy the paint, try to
Yep.
do the whatever. So set your ego aside and let a professional help you. And I think that's also why I talk to my clients in such a way, because they want to have such a close relationship with the text. And here I am as a human saying, we are going to review this and we're going to have eyes on this. And you can trust a human more so than you can trust AI, because we have a stake in it. So that's a little bit of me kind of working on my pitch as well for, why use it. Well,
and I think you've touched on it several times in here, which is the algorithms, right? This is where the SEO, the keyword optimization, some of that kind of comes in here that the average attorney doesn't spend time doing or spend time following, nor should they, right? I just did this presentation for a networking group this morning about the multiple roles that we wear as owners of our own business, or in the case of attorneys, our own firms. And that there's a lot of things that we end up doing because as entrepreneurs, we take on all these additional roles and we don't give those things up, or we don't delegate, or we feel as if we have to control them, when in reality, that's not the best use of our time, right? I always talk to my clients about, what is your time worth? If you're worth $100 or $200, or if you're an attorney that's billing out at $550 an hour, is it the best use of the company's funds to pay you, $550 an hour to write content, when we could hire somebody else to do it for far less than that, and do it in a fraction of the time and get far better SEO results and ranking results than what you would get on your own doing it or trying to figure out how to do it? To your point that they shouldn't be doing that, they won't do it, and regardless of whether they think they could do it, it's not the best use for the company.
Exactly. Yeah. And we make it very comfortable process. I mean, you always get Alan or I, more than likely both of us, sitting, not sitting because it's usually all virtual, but right, meeting with you, talking through what your objectives are. SEO is a long-term game.
Mm-hmm.
It is not a short-term, sugar rush of the pay-per-click. Like, that's just not what SEO is. But it can build authority. It can build credibility. I think it's very much common knowledge now that attorneys do get a lot of referrals from personal clients in their area, mm-hmm. but they're also having clients who may be on referrals, and they're automatically going to go to their site, or they're automatically going to go to some type of Google review, or they're going to try to find some more information about you. So to have a complete site does give the customer satisfaction that you care enough to build your stuff. You care enough that you have up-to-date content. You care enough that you have an up-to-date or very subject-specific pieces of content that are really relatable to that reader. And there are some clients that are really stringent and have, really set expectations. And I think that's great. I had to coach a client because they read some of our stuff, and on their feedback, they took out all the keywords and all key phrases because they said it sounded weird. And I was like, you are effectively taking out the things that the algorithm needs. And so I do have to coach and kind of play that middleman when the feedback comes, just to be like, hey, this is why we're doing things the way that we're doing them. So. Okay.
I like it. I mean, I think it's a good argument or debate to discuss kind of the implementation of this technology, which has its place, but in and of itself is not the solution, right? And I may have said this on a previous podcast. I know I've talked to a bunch of people about it. AI plus a person is far better than either of those things alone, right? And so if we utilize it in the manners in which it can be utilized or should be utilized, it does have an advantage. But thinking that we can just replace people and replace content writers with an AI generated content solution, it's just not going to happen. You're not going to optimize your results that way. So let's switch. And you started to allude to it. I had it written down when you mentioned Alan first, but talk to me about being in a partnership. Talk to me about some of the challenges that you've had, some of those that you haven't, because I've talked to a lot of people on here about solopreneurship, but here we have a partnership. So talk to me about some of the challenges with that.
Oh gosh. Well, before I get into challenges, I do just have to illuminate a little, just kind of the uniqueness in him and my story, because we've been friends for so long. I mean, there were years where we, I won't disclose what the argument was about, but we had gotten to a heated argument and we didn't talk to each other for a really long time. And I think it's one of those situations where we're just a little too alike. But then we came back together, right? And it was always with this like academic interest that we had both shared. Sure. And just, being nerds together. So some of the challenges have come from, I will say, timelines. So Alan and I, it was around 2018 when we both kind of looked at each other and were like, I wonder if there's like any businesses that like do this. Because we were just getting work off of Upwork. Sure. Is what we were doing. And then we were sharing clients with each other. Then we had both agreed that if we could make this into something, because we started exploring and seeing that there were businesses out there that were doing something similar, but weren't just focusing on content. They were doing the whole package. And we didn't want the whole package because we didn't have experience. So we started, he got the idea going. He got the website going. And it was launched in a very grief-driven space. So I had just lost my mother. I was starting my second year of law school. On my mother's deathbed, she was like, just get the degree. And then she also jokingly said, no more degrees for you. And I said, okay. In which Alan has held me to it. Yep. So, but it was that time, it was maybe about a month after she had passed away, that I was just in a really dark space. And I think the motivation for Alan to say, you know what, we're launching right now, I think was a little bit of a Hail Mary. Like, I don't know what to do. You are in the darkest place I've ever seen. You need something to hang on to. Let's launch it. And I remember being like, really? Now? Like, now you want to do this? And I'm really, really grateful that he did. And I think that's where having someone in your life who knows you, and I think that, again, that's why we're unique, because we've known each other for so long, that he was like, I know that Victoria is at her best when she's activated, when she's stimulated, when she's goal-oriented. Let's do it. And I'm so glad that we did. And I was able to focus not only on completing, my law degree, but I always had a goal to like, okay, how can we create a guide to train our writers? How are we even going to hire writers? And that was also like another piece of challenge is when we're looking through different, we do a lot of hiring off of LinkedIn, but looking through different resumes and whatnot to try to see who would be like a good fit for us. Like, we had a lot of challenges there. I had a perceived view of who I want our ideal writer to be. And Alan is like, hey, dollars and cents. Like, I know you want this type of writer, but we're not there yet, right? To pay them at the level that you want. So we got to figure out where that is. So we tend to do this dance of, when I'm kind of really high, he brings me down. When he's really high, I bring him down. And I love that, because I don't think this business could have run if it was just solely him or just solely me.
Well, and I think that the piece that you didn't literally say, but basically you're getting to there, is that complementary nature of the two of you, right? Even if you come from similar backgrounds, which you did, similar experiences, which you did, that individual nature of that each of those individuals bring to the table, it allows you to kind of mesh and fit together like puzzle pieces, as opposed to overlapping all the time. That Venn diagram that shows what each of you do really well and what the two of you do well together. It's so important for any partnership, because we tend to migrate towards people like ourselves. And so we've got to be careful that we don't find an identical twin to go into partnership with, because A, you're going to butt heads on the same issues all the time. And B, there's going to be a chunk of that business that just can't get done because the two of you, neither one of you wants to do it. You can't afford to hire somebody in to do it or something like that. And it's just going to be a gap that will always be there if you're not willing to do it.
Yeah. And, I know I'm lucky. I know that it's not something that you can just walk into a crowd of people and be like, hey, do you want to start a business with me? Like I am very lucky in that sense. We have gone through, some really difficult times in our lives together. Mm-hmm. I had dealt with several deaths, and then his father died. And as one of us is down, I get to carry, the backpack of the business. And then when I need to set it down, he gets to carry the backpack of the business. I think some of our biggest fights that we've had are really they're good fights. It's how do we want to expand? How do we want to improve on our operations? How are we going to maintain the integrity of the company while also incorporating more outside voices into it? We had just spoke with this amazing woman. I'll give her name, Tasha Graham. She was really wonderful. And she was talking to us just about, it was kind of our first step into looking at okay, where are these pieces of operations that, what does that mean? And so we're in this puberty stage of growing, and we do kind of fight about it. I mean, I do Blue 7, but I also am still a practicing attorney. So I still have that part that I have to kind of coddle every once in a while. I'm situated in a really great spot where I don't have to, have a full-time engagement, which is really nice. But yeah, so it's just kind of, it's nice to know that we both have the same goal, but we do kind of fight about how we're going to get there.
Yeah. And that's good. I mean, that's healthy stuff. The challenges I see, and you kind of alluded to it yourself, is sometimes people do go to that crowded room and kind of raise their hand, essentially, and say, hey, who wants to partner with me? Right. I don't want to dance alone, kind of thing. And deals get literally made over that proverbial, napkin and written out over a drink or two. And hey, let's go into this. Let's be partners. Yeah, let's just go in 50-50. We can each do this. And it's the Vegas. Now that I live in Vegas, it's the Vegas version of going to the wedding chapel and getting married, right? Let's just get into partnership together. We'll figure it out as we go. And then they do, and they don't realize they're truly in a marriage, right? They have gone and gotten married on a first date. And while that does happen occasionally, and there are some very happy couples out there that it turned out very well for, more often than not, it's a train wreck. And it's because they didn't take that opportunity to date a while before they got there. You two had this unique opportunity of knowing each other for years before you ever got into business together, right? And so you knew who was going to leave the cap off the toothpaste. You knew who was going to leave the toilet seat up. You knew those things about each other already. You knew where those flaws were. And you knew that you complemented each other a little bit. So it's such a unique thing in a partnership to have that type of relationship, because yes, I've seen couples that went into business together. And sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. But for the two of you to know each other as long as you did, to have similar backgrounds, but yet to complement each other, and to your point, each one can carry that backpack. Each one knows when the other one's down that they got to kind of take on the load. And it's an unspoken thing. You don't have to raise your hand and say, dude, pick me up here. I'm dragging, right? You
Yeah.
can sense that in each other because you've known each other for so long.
Yeah.
So what are those big challenges and those big obstacles that you ran in along the way? Not necessarily just the partnership, but even the two of you together for building this company from scratch. What were those big hills to come over?
Yeah. When it was just the two of us, we knew, I mean, we were already at a point where we were getting enough work where we knew we needed to hire someone else. We did have a friend of ours, again, another like lifelong friend, and we included her on the team. We trained her. We got her writing. She's a fantastic writer. So we were really blessed in that. But it really was, I'm trying to figure out how to frame it or how to say it. So it's a really delicate balance. Maybe just like supply demand, maybe, right? Where clients are requesting pages and then us having to hire on to meet those requests. And we've had a situation where a client had promised us they no longer work with them. They had promised us this giant amount. So we leveled up. 2 months later, they were like, just kidding. And we're like, what was that about? I know it was more about the AI thing because that was kind of converging around that time. So they were like, what's the point in hiring this agency? We can just AI. So I think that's been really difficult. Also, like when we were first starting to find writers, it was finding a level of experience where they may have known a little bit about SEO, but they may not have like a well-rounded understanding of it. Like we can train anyone on SEO or the factors of it or however you want to phrase it. And we can train on writing, but there is a little bit of a you have it or you don't kind of thing. So we used to do these big batch hirings from LinkedIn, and Ellen and I would sit like 2 days in a row and we would just do back to back to back. And when we hired people that we didn't know, or when we hired writers who were kind of like fresh out of college, it was really difficult. We've been ghosted several times. We've had to deal with the writers who, particularly when AI came on the board, they were writing and we read, all these pages. And I was like, okay, this is how so-and-so writes. And then all of a sudden shift. And I'm like, whoa, this is not the same page that I just read 2 days ago, so you have to have an open conversation. And unfortunately, many of them say, no, I didn't, I don't use that. And we don't like using AI scanners because we know that 80% of the time they don't work. But when things keep coming back 100% AI, and you've seen the contrast, the stark contrast in the writing, it's pretty much known that that's what you've done. So we've had to let writers go because that's not a part of our policy. That's not a part of what we do. We don't want our clients to get negatively impacted by that. We are now, because we've really used LinkedIn as a vessel to help really build our platform and our brand. And we actually have writers that follow us. And we've had some really great hires from that because they've like a relationship, right? They've come to us and we're not quick to be like, fine, boom, here, right. We get to see who they are. They interact with our posts. We interact with theirs. We get to see how they are. Occasionally they'll send us a portfolio. We'll read through it. And then on the occasion, when we have the space and time, because we're getting that supply demand, we hire. Just recently with the change in administration, there's been like a whole, just flooding of firing of attorneys in DC. And because I'm an attorney, I'm in these certain spaces. And I was able to help. I think it was called Rise Point was the agency that was doing like a pro bono job placement for those that were unfortunately fired. And I was able to scoop some of them up and just be like, hey, I know this isn't the job that you want. I know that you're dealing with some stuff, but if you need something on the side, please, we can offer that for you. And it was just a really great time because we had just acquired a client who was really emphasizing that they want only JDs to write for them. Yeah. And so I'm like, perfect. So now I have, just a crew of that. So, we went from a team of, 3 being me, Alan, and Morgan, who is now one of our admins, to we have 25 writers now. And that's a pool that we get to choose from when a new client approaches. And we're like, yeah, we know a writer that would be great for that. And we know these writers, we know the way they write intimately. So we know who would best fit a situation. We can also tell, we have a really good pulse on our team. So we can also tell when some writers are overwhelmed or feeling burnt out. We have lots of professionals that just do this on the side, and they'll be very transparent with us. Like, hey, I just got a big project. We're like, cool. We'll decrease some of your work and we'll displace it elsewhere. So it's just this really great team dynamic that we've created.
Okay.
I think that's a really long answer.
No, that's perfectly fine. I've got a couple questions coming out of it, but that's the whole point of this, right? I mean, it's simply a conversation. So
right.
One of the things you touched on in the beginning was this client that kind of burned you is probably the wrong phrasing to do for it, right? But it's like, hey, let's ramp this up. Let's do this engagement together. Oh, yeah, we're just kidding. Your reaction to that situation, was it, you know what, we're going to have to downsize the people we have, or I'm going to have to go out and sell like crazy to backfill? Which of those did you react with?
Yeah, we dug our heels in and got the clients to be for our writers. Okay. One of the pillars that Ellen and we will die over it. Like, we just have, maybe it's just like a total grudge, but we just remember pouring our energy into writing content, sending it off, and just getting ghosted and not getting paid or having to change. I mean, we still have a client when we originally started who still owes us $1,000 or $1,500, right? And it's a situation that I don't want anyone to have to go through. And it's just I think maybe a reflection on just how much we respect and value the type of career of writing. Sure. And so, we set up our business so that, God forbid things were to collapse now, we have enough, we will pay our writers, right? Even when we sign on a writer, we always pay for the trial pages because we just believe in that so staunchly. So yeah, it kind of lit a fire under our asses. And we're like, wow, we really can't depend. We need to dig in. And we did, and we found it. And I'm really grateful that we chose that action. I mean, we cursed a lot.
Oh, I'm sure.
We felt that ego hit. But we did. We conversely were just like, you know what, we're just gonna, and we were transparent with our team the entire time. We did say, like, we were promised X, it's not being delivered. Give us a month, we'll do it. So, and we did.
Okay. No, that's good. And I asked that question because I have seen them go both ways, right? And I have seen people hold on to employees too long, right? Ones that came through COVID, for instance, they had a rush in COVID. Real estate property manager that I know, made a bunch of hiring during COVID because, they happen to be the properties she manages are remote. So people would rent the cabins, go off into these remote places. And so she had a big bump during COVID, had to ramp up people, had to ramp up cleaners, etc. And felt bad as it ramped down, felt bad about having to let people go. And so the numbers in the business started to come down with it. And I know she struggled for a while because of it, because we don't want to do that. We start to care about our employees And sometimes we don't want them to see behind the curtain. We don't want to have them see that we're struggling, right? They're not as transparent as you just noted, right? I want to keep it close to my vest. I don't want people to see that I'm struggling. I want them to feel good about the company. And yet,
Yeah.
the fact of the matter is we can't keep it going like that.
And it's just a tough choice. Yep. It's just a tough call. And, thankfully we haven't been in a spot where we can't provide enough work for the team that we have. But just to add some nuance here, we have some people on our team that only want to write 5 pages. And then we have some people on our team that write full time, they're 40 pages plus. So when I say that, you know what I mean? It's not like we're full time chugging, all of our writers are getting 106 figures a year.
Sure.
That's not what I mean.
But I think you need that, right? And it's so, and this is what a lot of companies, especially if they're employing 1099s, they tend to think, well, I've got to have 1099s across everything, right? Which means I can only get everybody for more than 15 or 20 hours. That's not true, right? You may get somebody that can eat up a chunk of your demand. And if you find a few whales that are eager to eat up a chunk of your demand, then you supplement the rest of your demand, your peaks and valleys, by using these other people for 5 pages here, 10 pages there, right? We got an extra 100 pages. Well, we can divide that across a couple different people because couple different, however you can structure it so that the business, the demand line, is taken care of by the bulk of your handful of whales, and then you just handle the peaks and valleys by a handful of people that want much less out of the business.
Right. Yeah, because they have full-time jobs and they just need a little extra money. I mean, I have this really amazing writer that's we're starting to fill out our Chicago branch, right? Because I'm in Chicago and Allen's in Myrtle Beach. And so, I have a writer here that I love and she's building her whole new basement from it, but she's got a full-time job.
Yeah.
But that's her goal. That's what she needs. And I'm like, I can help you get there. So
I think the other lesson that came out of the answer that you gave me, was this discussion of LinkedIn. And I don't care if it's LinkedIn, if it's Insta, if it's, TikTok, whatever it is. It's that impression of the personal brand and the individual you're working with, right? You're hiring on LinkedIn. You're hiring specifically for writers on LinkedIn. I imagine that you don't just read their long form content that they have out there. It's the engagement. It's the reaction to this thing. It can be political viewpoints. It can be, all this kind of stuff. And as we see some of these platforms become more personal or more political, I think people forget sometimes that potential employers, potential clients, potential employees are out there reading that when they get ready to do business with us.
Yep. We just did a CLE course with the National Business Institute on what attorneys need to know about Blue Sky. Yep. And we spent a good probably 40% of that discussing posts, affiliations, and engagement. And I also teach a women and gender studies course. And I always make it a point during the semester to have what's my LinkedIn day. We actually just had it yesterday. And where Alan and I actually go through different profiles and we when you look on a profile, you can go to posts and you can see every single engagement that person has done. And any comment that person has made too. So we really hyper focused on the analogy, I guess, that I used is LinkedIn. I'll just say LinkedIn in particular is like going to an in-person social networking event.
Yeah.
If you see a post and you get angered by it, would you actually in person go up to them and say what you're about to write? And even though we might think we're all cocky and you wouldn't. You just wouldn't. Or you would say it in a different way than the way that you want to write it. But yeah, we definitely emphasize, and that's been a struggle between Alan and I. He, he's well, we were both really active on LinkedIn. I unfortunately got hacked and then had to
Yeah.
delete my
That
LinkedIn.
wasn't
I think
long
I had
ago
told
either.
you.
That was just a couple weeks ago.
Oh, yeah. So I went from like 2,000 plus connections to now 200, but that's okay. I will persist. Um, but so yeah, make sure you have your 2FA on for LinkedIn, just FYI. Oh man, I had lost my train of thought too. So LinkedIn, teaching.
You were about to say you and Alan have had your debates about this.
That was it. We've had our debates about what to post and what not to post, and I'm not going to get into the current political climate that we're in. There's a lot happening, but it is choices on how you want to engage with that. So what I have told my clients and what I try to do for myself is, if there is something going on in the world in which you have commentary on, the best way in which you can approach it is look at what services you can provide to be helpful. So I have ad nauseum talked to my friends who are immigration attorneys. And I'm like, now is the time for you guys to start really pushing out what your services are. If you are a employment attorney, now is your time to shine, right? So give out what your services are. I think that's the best way that I have really just accepted the situation and just saying, how can I serve people who may be in need? So even, with my practice, which I do estate planning and elder law, right? I'm like, hey, let's have a conversation about protecting assets. What does that look like? It's tangentially connected, right? We want to make sure that what we have is our own, no matter where we are. So that's what we've been kind of like coaching our clients on doing. And that's what like Alan will send me what he wants to post and I'll veto it or I'll edit it. And like vice versa. We have shared that with tons of people, and I will share that like now, like even if you don't have a business partner, get a friend of yours. And before you post, make them read it. If they're into it, post it. If they're like, this is not okay, don't do it. It's not worth it. It just really isn't.
Yep. I've told my clients that's one of the services as a coach, right? Is I'm at that sounding board. So toss something over the wall. Send me an email, contract, LinkedIn post, a marketing thing. I had a client that got really steamed from one of her clients last week. She contacted me on Friday. She said, kind of essentially talk me off a ledge because I really want to respond to this right now. It's like, okay, take your time, et cetera, et cetera. So I like that. I like this whole idea of kind of understanding that you have that check and balance for posting something before you put it out there. All right.
Yeah.
Well, Victoria, this has been wonderful. We could probably talk for another hour or two. Give me an idea. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you wanted to throw out there for the audience?
I think something that has really been like thrown around, and I can't speak specifically to any literature, which I apologize, but it's kind of this focus on organic growth and also being just patient with yourself and giving yourself some grace, particularly if you are an entrepreneur and you are trying to like edge out on yourself and be either solo or with a business partner. It's really easy to compare yourself to others who have already been in the game for years. Right. You're just not going to be there. You'll get there, and maybe in less time, maybe in more time, but something that is like super cheesy, like this concept of not giving up, like just don't, right? You can take days to rest. You can even take weeks. But if you stay persistent and keep going, something will occur. And I think that's been really conscious in our business growth because Al and I have had such hard life things happening in the background where we have had to make some decisions of like, we're not ready to get a new client. Like, we've had to say no to clients because either he was dealing with a death and was out of commission, or I was studying for the bar and I had maybe 5% to give to Blue 7 because the other 95 was to the task. And so not being disheartened to say no, because by giving ourselves that space, we were able to say yes tenfold. So, and one other thing I'll say is lots of people will be like, oh, I want to create something, but like, this person has already created it and they've got like 1 million viewers. Well, guess what? There's 1 million other viewers. So everyone's going to hear a story differently. Everyone's going to receive a product differently. Maybe those users like that person selling that product, but they don't know you yet. So when you stop comparing and you just stay in your lane and you're focusing on what your goal is, you'll be surprised what kind of starts to crop up.
That's perfect. I like it. And I think we'll just end it there. So I thank you for your time, Victoria. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me on.
So that's a wrap for this episode of Legacy Unscripted. If today's conversation sparked something in you, don't just let it sit. Let's take action today to build your future. Make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share this with someone who may need to hear it. And if you've got a story to share, or maybe you just want to connect, you know where to find me. Till next time, keep it real, keep it bold, and keep living your legacy.